Thanks for stopping in for another Q&A, guys. I'm sorry I'm a bit late with this one, but the wait is well worth it as I go over how to create future-based chords and leads, what platforms you should release your music on. This one's very important. And then I go over why transitions are incredibly important to your music and why they're overlooked and are just not worked on as much. And then a little interesting topic, I go over balancing a healthy lifestyle with music production. And I'm glad I got a chance to go over this topic as everyone wants to talk about tips and tricks, which is great. But, having a healthy lifestyle, knowing, how to balance it is also incredibly important. And I go over a ton more questions in this Q&A, so check it out. What are your tips for future bass sound design, leads, chords? How do you go about it? So, for designing those sounds, I like to keep it fairly simple. For the chords, I really like to keep it simple. The chords are usually just sawtooth waves, saw waves, as those are the most harmonically rich sounds that you can get. And with the future bass sound, that's what you want. You want full frequency sounds. And the chords are mostly going to provide the mid-range and the real weight to your sound. And the leads are going to provide most of the character to your sound. So as far as having an extremely interesting chord sound, it's not necessarily... You don't necessarily need it. It's the lead that you want to be interesting. You want to have that character. Because that's what the listener is going to focus on, is that lead. The saws, of course, you'll hear the saws, but they're not going to carry the timbral interest that the lead should. So I use saws. A lot of saw waves, filtering, EQing them. Nothing fancy at all, detuning them. Of course, detune, create a lot of voices to create big, wide, fat sound. Pretty standard processing or pretty standard creation in a synth for these chords. Of course, put reverb, some delay, but not too much, as you don't want to drown out the sound. Some saturation, and that's really it. Really something simple, as always, for your chords. For the leads, I'll use a lot of distorted leads. I'll use a lot of square waves. I'll use a lot of sine waves, combination of square and saw waves, and I'll use a lot of different distortion, and that will give it its character. I'll, open up FabFilter Saturn. There's a lot of great distortion settings in there that you could use. Really, any of your favorite distortion plugins, experiment with that. Experiment with modulation effects, stacking those on the leads to give a more interesting sound. So that's really where you want to focus to have that interest, is with the lead, not so much the saws. The saws provide that weight and power to your track and a lot of width. And the leads, I would say, distortion. Distortion adds a lot. Get a distortion that really changes the sound, really gives it character, really changes the wave that you're working with. As I mentioned, I use square waves, I use saw waves for leads. I will sometimes use triangle waves and manipulate them. Really just get crazy with the leads. Experiment a lot with the leads. It's not so much just sawtooth waves with the leads, as it is with the chords. Because once again, the chords, I want them to be fat, and saw waves give the most frequencies. They emit the most frequencies. They have they're most harmonically rich waves. That's why I use them. For as far as releasing music though, Spotify is really the name of the game right now. You of course still want to put your songs on SoundCloud. I really think it's a good idea to put it on all platforms, really. You never know who's going to listen to your music, who's going to pick it up, who's going to share it with their friends. and having the most amount of platforms available to you and you actually putting them on the platforms is important, because that's just a greater chance for you to get discovered. And all it takes is one person to share it to their friends, and then they share it to their friends, and then so on. So really using every platform you can, I think, is important. Releasing music, of course, certain platforms are going to work better than others, and your tracks will perform better on certain platforms just because of the size of the audience, or maybe it's the type of music that you're releasing. Maybe more people listen to EDM music on a certain platform, or more people, it's platform specific, I feel like. Transitions differentiate a pro track from an amateur track, in my opinion. I think one of the reasons that is because transitions require a lot of automation and a lot of tinkering. It's not just you apply one low cut filter and then that's the transition. I mean, sometimes I guess that could be the case, but transition effects, fills, that sort of thing, finer details, cutting sounds in and out. There's a lot more automation that goes into transitions. So if you're looking to take your tracks to the next level, I would definitely recommend spending more time on your transitions, and transitions meaning every 4 to 8 bars. That's usually where I put in transition, especially every 8 bars. That's where I'll definitely have a transition. It depends on the style track that you're working with, depends on the part of the arrangement that you're in, whether you want to transition every 4 bars. But every 8 bars I will have a transition, whether that be just a riser going and some low cut filtering, some volume automation. But really spend time automating a lot of your parameters. Low cut filtering, high cut filtering, reverb, delay, and volume automation for transitions. Just those effects, just those simple automation, you can get an incredible amount of different transitions. So you don't need any crazy effects. Reverb, delay, filtering, and volume is really all you need to create a professional transition. And of course, transition effects, layer effects. So I've noticed a lot of producers don't add that many effects in. They kind of have just their sections run together, or they'll do a really small effect and that'll be it. Not to say that you need to stack a zillion effects every single transition. Just be mindful that adding different interesting layers of effects will create a more polished sound. And you're working on the arrangement of the song and you don't have the idea fully fleshed out yet, it's okay to just skip over the transitions, because transitions do take a lot of time. They take a lot of time to work with, and all the automation again, and it does take a lot of tinkering with, and that could take you out of the creative zone. So I would definitely work on the fine-tuning the transitions later on in the production stages, not so much in the arrangement when I'm getting the ideas down. But just be mindful that you will need to spend time on your transitions. If you don't feel like, if you haven't spent a decent amount of time on transitions, then they're probably not that good. I'm going to say that. Another thing with transitions is you need to control the volumes of your transitions. When you're doing a lot of automation, reverb, delay, auto filtering, automating the resonance of the filter, your sounds will change in volume, and this will change the song dynamically. As far as you have your verse playing, and you have the transition, and that transition is louder, and then you go into another verse or so, and that's quieter, and there'll be a peak in volume. Of course, depending on how you transition, what effects you're putting on the sound. You just need to be mindful of that. You just need to be mindful of that when you're doing automation. There could be an increase in volume, so you'll need to do volume automation on your transitions as well if you hear a spike in volume, because that could definitely throw off the balance of your mix. And as Talifer pointed out, the buildup can get out of control as far as volume, because you have all your drum buildups going, your risers, your filtering, and that could throw off the drop The buildup can sometimes sound more powerful than the drop when you have all these automations going. So you really want to keep your transitions under control volume-wise. So keep that in mind. So for vocal chops, in electronic music, they're really important these days. They're always used, especially in the more melodic types of tracks. So for vocal chops, what I like to do is I like to take the vowels in the vocal that I'm using, the A's, the E's, the I's, and the U's. Why? Because these make the best notes to chop up, as they're more pronounced, they stay on a pitch, and are easier to make melodies with. So the A, E, I, O, U, those vowels work the best for getting vocal chops. So what I'll do is I'll take one of those little sections where the singer is singing a vowel, and I'll take that little clip, that little audio clip, and I'll put it in a sampler. And then I will tune that sample. So most all DAWs now have tuners, so you can just throw on a tuner at the end of that sampler, find out the pitch of that sample, and then tune it so you can play it on a MIDI keyboard. So that way when you hit C, a C note is playing. So that way the vocal sample is tuned, and you're ready to play in your melody. And what I usually like to do first is write in a simple melody with a synthesizer. Then take that MIDI note and put it on the sampler with the vocal. That way I can write the melody with a synth, and then just put it onto the vocal sampler. And that's usually how I like to start writing the vocals. And then to get a little more lush sound, just the standard delay and reverb at the end, and then an over the top compression, or the OTT, I'll add after the delay and reverb, and that will give a professional sounding a vocal chop. Sound selection. A lot of times arrangements won't have proper sound selection. They'll be missing certain elements that have certain frequencies that fill up an arrangement, fill up the mix, make a bigger sound. You really need to know kind of where specific sound should go. I know that's kind of vague, but every section of your arrangement will have a specific frequency content, and the frequency content in these specific sections defines your arrangement. So, your breakdown is obviously not going to have, a anthem-like progressive house lead playing full on with a kick and snare. It's going to be more mellow, it's going to be more filtered, it's going to have less high frequencies. Your drop is, of course, going to have the most amount of frequency content. Knowing what sound should go where to create a dynamic arrangement, and something that fills out the frequency spectrum for the specific song that you're working on, or just the arrangement. So it really comes down to you listening to other songs in your genre and listening to what sounds go in the specific parts of the arrangement. For example, on build-ups, usually build-ups will contain a lot less bass information, less bass frequencies, as the drop will contain a lot of bass frequencies. So taking away the bass frequencies in the build-up will lead to a bigger drop, and you'll see that in a lot of tracks. The bass elements are taken away. It does mention there's not a lot of crazy high frequencies in the breakdown. In the verse, there may be some high frequency material, there may be some low end material, but it won't necessarily carry the same weight and power as the drop. How do you get over writer's block and analysis paralysis when trying to fix something / spending so much time on sound design or selection. So that's something, I still struggle with at times too. I haven't say I would master this, but definitely setting a time limit for yourself could, be helpful. I've definitely used this, setting a time limit for how long you work on it. The more you work on something, whether, sound design related, it seems to be, you want to take breaks. You don't want to work on it for too long, really, at one period of time. I would say that's the main thing, is set a time limit, stick to it, and move on. Then come back to it, and if you really feel like it needs it, change it. Oftentimes, when I keep changing things and working on something and EQing and adding layers and distortion and just going crazy with sound design and tweaking, I'll end up just destroying the sound, and it will sound better. It sounds better when I had none of that processing on in the first place. Don't get caught up in it. Really. You, of course, want to try and make the best sound that you can. You will, of course, want to spend time on your layers, get them sounding good, but there just becomes a point where it's doing no good at all. And your ears get used to what you're listening to, and your perception of sounds change as you continually listen to them over and over. And setting a time limit and moving on from it after that will help you reset your ears and not keep you messing around with it, changing the sound when it doesn't need to be. Sometimes you need to know when, okay, sound is good, this will work for this track, I don't need to mess with it. Because technically every sound could be tweaked even more. Every sound in your mix can be tweaked slightly. So you can't let it consume you, is what I'm trying to say. You can't let it consume you. It'll just eat up a lot of time, and it'll waste time. Also, listen to the sound designing that you've done, the tweaking that you've done in the context of your mix. Oftentimes I'll work on a sound, keep working on it, I'll zoom in on that particular sound, layer or whatever, put in, a half hour into the layer, and then play back the song, and it won't sound good with it. The layer that I thought sounded good, it's like, I'll finish the layer, play the sound, and be like, oh, it sounds good. And then listen to it in the context of the entire song, and then it won't sound good. So, that's another reason why I say not to spend too much time on it, because you kind of lose sight of, the entire track as a whole. You want to make sure it fits in the context of your track. Don't feel like you need to fix everything. Don't feel like you need to add a zillion layers to everything. If it sounds good, if you work on it, it sounds good. You come back to it, it sounds good. Don't touch it. It's fine. I would say that's the big thing, because it is a dark hole going down that, analysis and fixing things and sound designing. So, a time limit, move on, listen to it with fresh ears. If you feel like it needs improvement, set a time limit again, work on it again, put it away, listen to it again, and a later date and time, and make a decision if you need to further work on it. But usually, it doesn't need as much work as you think. As a producer, we tend to spend too much time sitting at our desk. What tips would you give producers to balance music and healthy lifestyle? Very true. I spend a lot of time at my desk, like a lot, all day pretty much, from the time I wake up to the time I go to sleep. Personally, for me, this is kind of it's not really it is a producing question. This can be applicable to someone who has like a desk job or something like that. Also, that just sits down all day. Personally, for me, I exercise a lot. I recommend you exercise, obviously because it's healthy. But another reason, more production related, is you have a different mindset when you come back to produce. Completely different mindset. Your body has gone through a lot of chemical changes, physical changes, and you have a different mindset when you're in your DAW. When you're sitting down in front of a computer working on a song for 6 hours, you go exercise, go run, lift weights, whatever, something active. You have a different mindset. You approach the song differently, and that can make the difference between you getting into a creative rut and you not. So exercising really does help fix that. Other smaller tips as far as sitting at your desk when working, you always want to keep it fresh. You always want to feel fresh. You don't want to sit there and feel like you're sinking into your desk. Stand up, get a laptop stand, produce while you're standing up, do some dancing while you're producing. Get into your music. Like I said, get a laptop stand so you're not hunched over on your computer. You're not looking down on it and really uncomfortable. You be comfortable when you're standing up. Super simple, super effective. Have water with you at all times. Another extremely simple tip. Just those three things: water, standing up from time to time and produce, and exercising and coming back and producing, will already completely change your outlook on music. Staying hydrated all the time. If you're not, you get headaches. You get more cranky. You have more energy when you're hydrated. So yeah, super simple tips. I follow those every day, and it does make a big difference in producing, but not just producing, really anything you're working on. When you're sitting where you're sitting down all day and working on something, it'll make a difference. So it's not just producing. If you're doing schoolwork all day, do the same. You'll perform better. So I hope the advice that I gave in this Q&A has really helped you out, or helped you think about music production in a different way, as that's really the goal with these Q&As. It's not so much to tell you, you need to do this, you need to do that. It's really to have you get a different perspective on music production with the questions that you ask. So if you want to get your question answered on this live Q&A, go ahead and head on over to the SoundShock Facebook page at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Wednesday, and I run the live stream for about an hour and a half. That's once again on the SoundShock Facebook page. I go over your questions at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I run for about an hour and a half. So I hope to see you guys in the live stream with all your music production questions. I know you guys have them. You guys are always messaging me all these different questions that you have. So I'd love to see you in the live stream. That way I can share my answers with not only you, but with everyone else. So I'll see you guys next week.